shit, that's me. Thinking, who the hell's got their phone on? My brother-in-law calling from Macedonia. All right, let's put that on silent. I didn't even know I had that ringtone. There you go. All right, so hopefully there are a couple of decent images in here for you to enjoy. I've taken a few days to put this thing together, and I only realised once I did a dry run yesterday that it's about 10 minutes longer than I want it to be. So if I talk a little bit fast, that's why. So we're going to cover off three things. I want to talk about how I came to photography, because whenever I meet somebody who's doing something that interests me, I always want to know, well, how did you start? How did you get your break? What was the beginning and how did that come about? We're going to talk about why I now choose to shoot with Hasselblad after spending years shooting with Nikon, Canon, Fujifilm, Mamiya, that sort of stuff. Most recently Canon, so why I chose Hasselblad. And we're going to learn a little bit about how to take half-reasonable car photos. Now, many years ago, my old man gave me a very sage piece of advice. That's my old man on the right. He's 89, and I reckon he's fitter than I am. That's my son on the left. He said to me, son, you work too hard. At some point, you're going to need to learn to be good to yourself. So while we're here to play with some nice Hasselblad gear and learn about the new X2D2 and to learn a little bit about car photography, I reckon that maybe another reason we're here too is to get a little bit of that spark, sort of an opportunity to indulge our creativity and do something that's, as my old man would say, being good to yourself. And I think the photography, and particularly the kind of photography I like, landscape photography and car photography, slows you down, and it's a way of sort of disconnecting from all of the crap that we're bombarded with every day and just being good to yourself, enjoying a bit of quiet time doing some photography. Some famous artist said a long time ago that all children are born artists, but the problem is to remain an artist as we grow up. And that dude was Picasso. 45 years ago, I was given one of these, my very first camera, by my dad. A Voigtlander 35mm rangefinder film camera. I'll just wait for this guy to come in. This was a camera that my old man had used 22 years earlier on his solo circumnavigation of Australia in this FJ Holden utility, surviving by his wits, his resourcefulness, and that .22 rifle which he used to catch dinner most nights when he was in the outback. Incredibly, he only got one flat tire on the whole trip, which is just bizarre back then. But the moment he handed this camera to me, a little spark went off inside of me, and I sensed that I was holding something truly wondrous, something magical. And by the time I'd wound my first roll of film back into the canister, I knew this was something that I was going to want to do for the rest of my life. I just sensed that this just fits with me and who I am. Because back then I was a 12-year-old, anxious teenager, bullied in school, and this little camera, managed to calm my nerves, and it sort of anchored me in the present and allowed me to engage with something that felt utterly mesmerising and powerful to me. And that was the ability to freeze a moment in time forever. And I've heard a lot of photographers say the same thing, that was the thing that really got them in, was this idea that I've captured something and it'll never be repeated again and I have a record of it. And that was captivating to me. Back then I was also a mad dirt bike rider, and so this little camera was my companion at the local motocross track more weeks than not. And I started taking photos of other riders, that's both me, but I started taking photos of other riders and selling them to them and to their proud parents. Then when I turned 16, I did something which I'm amazed that my parents let me do. I went on a 5-day desert safari in the far northwest region of Victoria with 6 much older riders on this crazy adventure. And I took my little Voigtlander with me and took some photos along the way. And at my dad's urging, I wrote a story and sent it off to this magazine, my favourite magazine at the time, Trail and Track. And to my great astonishment, they published it. And they even asked me to submit more stories if I wanted to. So that was pretty damn exciting, seeing a byline in my favourite magazine, and it made my next door neighbour jealous as hell, which was awesome. So by that stage, I was just totally obsessed with photography. I just shot anything and everything that would sit still long enough, up until finally my very first car, my Holden Gemini panel van. Me looking chic in 80s regalia. But photography was expensive. It's expensive now if you're shooting film. So, I had to fund my obsession somehow. Luckily, we lived just 4 doors away from this golf course here in Mount Martha, so I would go around there every weekend collecting all the stray balls and some that weren't quite so stray and selling them back to the pro shop to fund my rampant consumption of film. Then when I turned 18, something quite marvellous happened. I caught an incredible break. This magazine that I'd been writing for on and off was bought by the country's most respected newspaper at the time, The Age. And at my dad's urging, I decided to write another story and just see if they would print it. Now that they were sort of big shots, I thought they're not going to print it because back then it was a little sort of dinky publication. But again, to my amazement, they said, yeah, we'll print it. And because they just acquired this magazine, they hired an art director to give it a whole fresh new look. And he saw my photos in here, and I can't see it now, but he reckoned that he saw some talent in there. He said that my photography reminded him of himself when he was my age. And he said, you need to pursue this. Now, back then I was working with the Commonwealth Bank. I started with them when I was 16, and like a lot of kids back then, I chose the safe path. I wanted to be an accountant, thank God I didn't do that, but banking was probably no better. And the thought of spending the next 40 years of my life behind a desk in a suit, that's an AI image of me, believe it or not, it just depressed the hell out of me. And often I would break out in rashes on my chest and my arms, just feeling like I was trapped in this life that I really didn't want. But this art director, this dude here on the right, he looks like Magnum PI. He spent a couple of hours on the phone. He rang me up and he spent a couple of hours on the phone trying to convince me. And this Ferrari of his, incidentally, he repainted that thing himself in his own garage. He was one of those people that can just be creative with anything. He can turn his hand to anything. The kind of stuff this guy's done is phenomenal. But anyway, he spent ages trying to convince me. And the final thing he said to me really hit me. He said, listen, you're not a banker. You are a photographer. He said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little assignment. I want you to take one roll of film, 36 exposures, and I want you to go out and photograph a car, any car, I don't care what it is, but I'm going to set up a meeting between you and the managing editor of Sign magazines, and I want you to take the results of that little shoot to him for him to look at them. And I want you to get 30 publishable shots out of this roll of 36. So I went out and shot my Gemini, thinking I was doing a great job. But then when I got to this guy's house, this imposing, chain-smoking managing editor of Sign magazines, I sat in his huge lounge in Mount Eliza, handed him my little prints, and here's what he did. He got the prints and he went, no, ooh, no, no. So immediately I thought, that's it, I've blown it, This guy convinced me that I should get out of banking and into photography, and I've sort of moved in this direction now and keen to do it, and I've just completely blown it. But then without even looking up at me, he said, so what are you earning in the bank? I said, $100 a week. He said, we'll give you 120, you start Monday. So I was in. And so I started shooting for Trail and Track, and ironically, that's my first front cover there on the left, and that was shot 1 kilometre away from the staging point where I did that first safari when I was 16. So, agreeable symmetry. Then I went to shoot for Australian Motorcycle News as well, shot a bunch of cool bikes, first MotoGP down at Phillip Island that Wayne Gardner won, and some of my shots have actually been used in that documentary. But my goal always was to get to shoot cars. And I envied the guys who were working for Car Australia. And finally I got my chance in 1990, and that's my first front cover there at the Thunderdome. And that's what I shot for from then on. And it was awesome. I absolutely loved it. I got to do so many cool things, starting with driving my first Lamborghini on P-plates. You can see the P-plate just here. Which made my envious neighbour really envious. They thought, what the hell is going on? This kid must be a drug dealer or something. But that was pretty damn awesome. I got to do all sorts of cool stuff. I got one-on-one driving instruction with Alan Jones, their Formula One champion, at the 850i, M5 and 318IS launch up in Queensland. And so he was on hand to talk about the cars and to give people driving instruction around the track and show them how to drive fast. And it was awesome. I was in the E34 M5 barreling around this track on my own, going as fast as I could, but this little 318IS was snug back there on my ass and I couldn't shake it. And when I pulled over and we stopped, that was Alan Jones driving the 318IS with about a third of the amount of horsepower and 3 other people on board, and I couldn't get rid of him. So when he came into the car with me and started giving me instruction, he said one thing which stuck with me and I've used ever since. He said, just remember, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so that's how I drive now. I got to photograph and dine with legends of the MotoGP world, like Wayne Gardner, Mick Doohan, Wayne Rainey and Randy Mamola. And I never got a single selfie, so I can't prove to anybody that I was doing that. But these are two of the photos I shot of Wayne at the inaugural MotoGP down at Phillip Island, and both of those were used in that documentary. I got to hang out at racetracks. This, incidentally, is, I don't know if you guys know Michael's Camera and Video down in Melbourne before they shut down, but that was Alan Michael's 7-litre manual transmission Lister Jaguar XJS. The thing was just a monster. To give you an idea of just how much torque this thing had, at the drag strip there at Calder Raceway, he put it into 5th gear and took off from a standing start in 5th gear, all the way up to 200 and something k's an hour. That's how much torque it had. It was just a monstrous thing. I got to hang out of a helicopter at the Australian Safari. I was very lucky. They asked me if I could be the official photographer for the '86 Safari. And as luck would have it, I had just lost my license for speeding right at the time when the Safari was, so I was available and it was awesome. So I got to do that. And you know, for a young kid, that was just phenomenal. That is actually me hanging out of the chopper. And that was just an awesome experience. You know, I hovercrafted to a remote beach in Broome. Mitsubishi did a relaunch of their Magna because Ford and Holden had both come out with new cars and they had nothing new. So they thought, let's just relaunch the car again. We'll get the press out, we'll wine and dine them at the Burswood Casino, and then we'll fly them up to Broome and put them in the Cable Beach Club Resort and get lots of press. And they did. And it was awesome. You know, the whole thing was just a dream. But every dream has its counterbalance. And for me, it was the money. This place just didn't pay very much. And they could get away with that because the job was awesome. I mean, you were living a dream. You're driving fast cars, staying in 5-star resorts, flying in private jets sometimes. It was awesome, but you didn't have enough money to rub together to pay your bills. I mean, most guys, by the time I was 25, were buying a house, getting married, driving nice cars, but I was renting a 1-bedroom unit and couldn't afford to pay my bills and was still driving a bloody Gemini. So it was frustrating. My red letter day came when I was driving one of these, a Red Lotus Esprit Turbo. And I was sat at a set of lights in Spring Street in the city. And this guy at the tram stop next to me said, "Nice car, mate." And I said, "Thanks, it's not mine, it's a press car." And I'd said that dozens of times before, driving different cars. Only this time it really hit me. I thought, as long as I'm here photographing fancy cars, dining on other people's bill and doing all this cool stuff, I'm never going to afford a nice car or a nice motorbike or a house. So I have to leave. And I remember when I handed in my resignation, the managing editor said, "Don't worry, you'll be back. Everybody comes back." Because this job is too good, which made me more determined not to go back. So I entered the next few decades of my life in the corporate world. I started selling cars for Honda. Because I'd driven NSXs probably more than most people in the country at the time, they put me in charge of selling NSXs. And then I went on to do advertising and then enterprise software. Because, life happens. You get married, then you have kids, gorgeous kids, and financial security becomes the priority. And so all of my time and energy and attention went to that. I still shot freelance for some brands, for Saab, for Mazda, for some manufacturers and other related automotive businesses, but the bulk of my time and energy went to making money and being financially secure. But then a close friend of mine died. John was only 50 and he was fit. He was a black belt in Taekwondo. He was healthy. He was strong. But unfortunately, cancer had other plans for him. So when we had our last phone call, as he was heading off to palliative care, after I put the phone down, for some reason I grabbed my camera, I think then a D750 Nikon, and I thought I just need to get out of the house and go and point my camera at something. Just be out in nature for a while. And I took this photo of these trees. And immediately I felt like I'm home again. I thought, this is who I am. I'm not a corporate guy. I'm a photographer. And I've always been a photographer. I just happen to earn a living as a corporate guy. So from that point on, I recommitted to the practice again. The practice of being outside in nature with a camera in my hand and just being present and enjoying capturing whatever I saw. Now, over the years, I've shot with a ton of different brands. Not a lot compared to some, but I think I've had about 20 different cameras. And I started off with the Ricoh XRP. That was the very first real camera that I bought as a kid after the Voigtlander. And I shot my first front cover of that magazine with that camera. But pretty soon it became apparent that it wasn't up to the rigours of shooting out in the dust and the rain and all that sort of stuff. So I moved to Nikon, and now the company, the magazine company, was paying for it, so that was great. Started off with an FE2, went to an F3, and then went on to shoot Mamiya alongside the Nikon. And some of my best covers were shot on 120 Velvia. I love shooting medium format. I loved how it slowed you down and made you reconnect with the process of photography rather than just blasting off shots, you know, left, right and centre. I love that camera. More recently, I went to the R5 after trying a couple of APS-C Canon cameras. And then I got an R6 and R7 and a few other bits and pieces. I tried the X series Fujifilms. As much as I love them, they're gorgeous little things. They're like little jewels. I never quite connected with the camera, and so I bought them twice and sold them twice. One camera I really love is a little Leica Deluxe 8, which I got from Saul, and that has continued to surprise me just how competent that little thing is. I love that, and that's my everyday carry camera. That's always in my car. But finally, I got to fulfill a lifelong and long dormant dream to buy myself a Hasselblad. I always knew they were the duck's guts back when I was shooting professionally. Not good for shooting motocross and stuff like that, but as an artist tool, that was the camera to have. I fell in love with the 907X. This is what I really wanted, because this thing is gorgeous. But for what I wanted to shoot, it just wasn't really practical. So this thing made a whole lot more sense to me. As somebody who's used to a mirrorless camera and DSLR, this just felt right, and I certainly haven't regretted doing that. So when I used the X2D for the first time, I think I've got some audio here, have I? When I used it for the first time, I got that same feeling again that I did 45 years ago with the Voigtlander. I got that spark again. There was no stupid menus, no myriad options. You know, here instead was a masterpiece of industrial design, intuitive software and logical controls. And just as the Voigtlander did 4 decades ago, this camera has managed to sort of now calm my middle-aged mind, not my 12-year-old mind, and re-engage with this process of just being present in nature and taking photos. And the first images that came out of this camera were everything that everybody said it was going to be. The colour rendering, the fall off of light and the tonal transitions. The oranges and the blues and the greens are just gorgeous. And skin tones, just fantastic. I especially love the way it renders the oranges and the greens. So much better than the Fujifilm from what I've seen. I haven't used the Fujifilm GFX system, but I have seen side-by-side comparisons, and I really love the colour. This shot, incidentally, this is what really stunned me when it came to the image quality. This woman here, you can actually see both of her eyes and the expression on her face, and everything is absolutely pin sharp. It's just awesome. Phenomenal camera. Skin tones, like I said, that's my wife. And close up, the little water droplets on her skin and everything, and the rendering, it's like reality, but better than reality. It's like reality plus 10%. It's very hard to describe, but the colour science, well, I guess it's simple. There's 281 trillion colours that it's recording, which is just out of this world. So, you know, the user experience of this camera told me, like with my first Porsche that I bought back in 2022, that like the Porsche, this is a brand that I would want to have probably for the rest of my life from here on in. I would like to ideally own at least one Porsche from now on because I've always admired them. And likewise now with the Hasselblad, I think I will probably always own a Hasselblad. Because with this camera, it's more like a meditative experience. It's kind of like the experience that I had with the old Mamiya, where it really slows you down. Even though you don't need to slow down now with the X2D2, with its extra speed and all the other stuff that it's got. But unlike, say, the R5, it doesn't reward frantic shooting. It rewards presence. It rewards a more deliberate, sort of thoughtful kind of photography, but without any of the compromises of medium format film. And again, the colour is just gorgeous. And converting the images to mono also, just really nice. So this camera, with its incredible lenses, has made a lot of hardened, cynical old shooters fall in love with the craft again. And that, more than anything, is why after 45 years of shooting, I now choose to shoot most of my images with a Hasselblad, because to me, it really is an artist's tool. So like the pairing of Hasselblad with my Porsche, I think they complement each other really nicely. They're both engineered by people who really care. Porsche builds sports cars for people who really enjoy driving. And I think Hasselblad builds cameras for people who really enjoy the process of photography. So they go together very well for me. And it kind of reminds me that feeling that I got back in the early days of getting back outside and just being with nature. It all has given me a fresh appreciation of my dad's advice. And that is, don't work too hard and be good to yourself. And that's it for the philosophical rambling. Now we can talk about car photography. God, I never talk so much. All right, so what you're all going to get before you leave, well, you'll see it at the end screen. I wrote a car photography field guide. I think it's about 76 pages long. It's made for your phone, so you always have it with you. Looks like this. So there's 6 chapters in there. Yeah, 6 chapters. So we're going to just touch quickly on 4 of them in this, but I'm going to give you all a 100% discount code so you can get this for free. I think it's $30 US normally. But this distills basically everything I've learned over the last 40 odd years of car photography in a nice, simple, phone-friendly guide. All right, so we're going to touch on 4 areas, just quickly. The first is the 4 questions that I think everybody needs to ask before they take not just a car photo, but probably pretty much any photo. Second is lenses and filters that are suitable, or I think ideal, for shooting cars. Third is shooting angles. And the 4th is location ideas. We're going to skip over these pretty quickly. The other 2, dealing with the light and pillars of mastery in car photography, you can pick up on the guide when you get your free copy. 4 questions. The first one is always, and I think this is with anything, is what is my subject? And oftentimes we think it's obvious. Well, it's the person I'm photographing, or it's the car I'm photographing, or it's a motorbike I'm photographing. But is it just that? Is it just the car? Because if you place a car in a studio, okay, it's just the car. But if you're placing a car outside, it could be also something else, like what we're going to see when we go over there and shoot that Porsche. You've got to ask yourself, what is the point of this image? Is it just to show a car, or is it to show a car in its environment? Is it to show this car relative to something else? There's always more to the story than just a photo of a thing. So I always recommend walking around the area first, without your camera. Just walk around and get familiar, like Saul and I did when we went and had a look at that laneway. I just got out, had a look. Oh yeah, we could use that, we could use that. Yeah, that looks good, yeah. We could do a few different shots here. And focus on what drew your eye in the first place. It's very, very easy to think, go from, oh, I like that, to, oh, now I've got my camera. Oh, crap, what do I do? Don't forget what drew you to something in the first place, and don't make the viewer work too hard to understand what it was you saw when you saw this thing that you wanted to photograph. And that leads very, very closely to the next thing, which is how am I going to compose this scene? How am I going to arrange the elements? And then where am I going to put myself relative to these elements to convey this story that I want to tell? So remember your subject, because that will lead you. And then think, okay, is this a wide shot? Is this like a standard shot? Or is this something tight that I want to get far back and compress everything and blur background, foreground, or both? And what can I exclude? What can I cut out of here? What can I hide, or what can I blur? So once you get your camera in hand, try different things. Get down low, get up high, you know, put on a wide lens, put on a long lens. After a while of shooting, you just go, I know exactly what this needs. And you don't need to do that. You get a sense straight away of what it is. But in the beginning, great practice to do that. Look for lines and shapes and balance. And check for intrusions in the sides of your frames, but also intrusions that cross over the vehicle, like a pole sticking out the back of it or something else that you don't want in there. Third of these 4 questions is, what is the light doing? Now this is tricky, but I would say, just as it was when I was shooting for a living, you can't fight it, you just got to work with it. So whatever the light is what it is. Pay attention to panels and glass, because a car is a massive mirror. It reflects everything around it. So see what the light's doing on the car, and maybe it's better from here because the light's hitting it from there and bouncing off there, and that looks heaps better. So let's move the car a bit. Angled light, rear and side, works very nicely with cars. And if it's bright, it's harsh, it's midday, maybe convert the image to mono or partially mono, which I like doing sometimes. Change the angle if you need to, you or the car. And if you have time, just wait, see what the light does. And remember, great light isn't a subject. So many people go, oh, this looks awesome, this light is beautiful. But the subject's crap. You've got a nice sky, you've got nice warm light, but it's a rubbish bin or something else. So the subject is still the subject. 4th question is, what is my exposure priority? Not how do I work out my exposure, but what's your priority? If focus is important to you, how much of the image is in focus, then your aperture is your priority. Do you want to blur the foreground or the background, or do you want everything in focus? Aperture is your priority then. Work that out first. Or do you need to freeze motion, or do you want to blur motion like this 30th of a second shot of this Toyota 86? Well then, that's your priority. So set that first. Or you might want to mitigate camera shake, although not much of an issue with these X2Ds with their in-body image stabilization. It may well be that ISO is your main thing. You think, I just want to shoot at ISO 64 and everything else has to work around that. So that becomes a priority. I tend to prefer to let my camera set it for myself. Unless I'm shooting on a tripod and it's still and it's static, then yeah. This shot here, for example, shot at ISO 64, and of course it's nice and crisp. Oh, there it is. Took a while. Okay, let's get on to lenses and filters. Lenses first. The 35-100 they just launched is the lens to use for car photography, I reckon. I reckon that is just made for it. And portraiture and landscapes. It's a brilliant lens and I can't wait to get mine. And if you can augment that with something longer, like the 135 or the 1.7, well then you've got...
We've got two actually you can have a play with tonight.
Yeah?
And we've got the 135 and 1.7. I didn't even know you were going to put that up there.
If you have those two, you've got everything you need for car photography and landscape photography, huh?
I've got a mint edition second camera.
Now I've got the 35-75 at the moment, and that Hasselblad reckons before this new one came out, they reckon that was the best lens they'd ever made. And it is a brilliant lens. It's incredibly sharp, it's beautiful, but I'm hanging for the 35-100. If you've got a couple of primes, say a 45p and a 90, also works well, or the 120 or the 135, although it's a bit of a stretch between focal lengths, but those two together would work nicely. Designers and engineers and aerodynamicists pour years of labour into a car's design, so for heaven's sake, don't photograph it like this, all right? Because you just completely distort what they intended, and don't photograph it like that. That's an intentionally bad shot from me. So let's look at some image examples. This is what I consider wide, 24 to 40 mm on full frame, which with the XCD is 30 to 50. And I tend to shoot wide when I want to do an environmental shot to show the environment, to give context. This is not just a photograph of a car on some asphalt, it's a photograph of a car at the Thunderdome at Calder Park Raceway. So I want to get more of this scene into it. This is shot with the 21, which is pushing it. But because the sky is so dramatic, it kind of gets away with it. But you can see there's quite a bit of distortion here, which is not ideal, but it's better than what I'm going to show you in a minute. Wide lenses give you context. This is a McCann deep in the forest on a dark, lugubrious day. And so it gives this sense of ancient foreboding in this old forest up in Mount Macedon. A standard lens, 45 to 60 roughly in full frame, XCD it's 55 to 75 roughly, just gives you a standard perspective if that's what you want. And because most of them are pretty fast lenses, standard lenses, you can still blur out your foreground nicely with a wide aperture, but it's a standard look. That's a standard perspective, very similar to what the human eye sees at that distance from a vehicle. My favourite though is longer lenses. 70 to 200 roughly in full frame, XCD 90 to 230, and 230 is what you get when you get the 135 with the 1.7 adapter on it. I love the way it compresses the front and the back. I like the way it allows you to easily blur foregrounds and backgrounds like this. And when you get down low, it pushes the car together, the front and the back. I love that look. It's great also for detail shots, for bits and pieces of a car, brake calipers, dials, that kind of thing. It's my favourite lens, focal length, is anything over, really anything over 100mm in the XCD range really, is what I ideally want to shoot this kind of stuff with. Filters. Filters are easy. You only need one. CPL, that's it. For shooting cars, all of my cameras and lenses all have CPL filters on them except video cameras sitting inside my studio at home. Because reflections are the bane of your existence when it comes to shooting cars. But it's not just for that. For landscapes, it gets rid of all the reflections on leaves and all sorts of other stuff. Here's an example. Here's a very boring photo of my car. And you can see reflections here, reflections on the road, reflections on the headlights. Everything looks kind of dull. The same shot with a CPL on it, totally different. But it's the same photo. All the colour is here now, and this hasn't been manipulated. This is what a CPL does. It gets rid of all the haze, the glare, the reflections and everything, and when you rotate it in the right direction for the right plane that you want to get rid of reflections of, that's what you get. Makes a massive difference. So from that to that, it's huge. It reduces reflections, and like I said, it cuts through haze, it richens up the colours on the panels and the skies, like this red here on this Cayman. It just makes the red pop. And foliage, nice and green. But you can only get rid of reflections on one plane at a time. So here I've gotten rid of it on the horizontal plane, but the vertical plane, reflections remain. If I rotated the other way, they would disappear and this would have reflections on it. That's the only thing with the CPL. This one, I got rid of the reflections on the windscreen and the bonnet so I could get that nice sunset coming from the left on the tyres and the side panel and glass. Angles. These are my favourites. Dead front or rear, quarter or three-quarter, profile and overhead. I'll give you some examples. Dead rear, long lens, compresses the trees, nice and clean and simple. Same with the front, down low, blur the foreground. The compression brings the mountains closer to the car and it allows me to blur them out, make the car jump out of the background. This though is a wide shot because I wanted to give context. I wanted to show where this car is in relation to this beautiful scenery here in Queenstown. So wide lenses work well, providing the car isn't big in the frame. You want to push the car back, get more of the rest of the scenery into it. And this is more with a standard lens. Fog is awesome. Fog is also great, always great on cars. Again, long lens, down low, nice and compressed. Bunches up the front and the back. I love it. Next most popular is probably, well, this is probably the most popular, is three-quarter and quarter shots of a car. This one was, I should have recorded it. I think this was about 40 mil roughly, so I could get more of the scenery in there. These are kind of dull in here, aren't they? Longer lens, compresses the front and the back. These are all very standard, common things. One thing I'll point out is, if you shoot in the front, turn the wheel in a little bit. Either have it straight or turn it in a little bit to show the face of the wheel. Never turn it outwards to show the tyre, unless you're doing a tyre commercial, which you're not. So turn the wheel in or have it straight. Profile is trickier. Profile, you want to get far enough back that you don't get any bowing in the car. I'll show you what happens in a sec when that happens. But dead side on, with anything over, say, 70 mil XCD, is fine. Whether you go high, low, or dead level with the car. This is shot with a drone, but this was also 77 mil lens. This is what happens when you shoot with a wide lens and you point the camera down. The wheels go up like this. Looks terrible. If you point it down, then they go inwards like this. Also terrible. If you get far enough back, you can almost get away with it. Overhead, hardest one to get, but often the most rewarding. The drone is the cheat. I think this was shot with a Hasselblad lens on the Mavic anyway, so it's still a Hasselblad. So is that one, and that one. But the good thing is overhead gives you a perspective that we're not used to seeing, and it reveals details of the car that we're not used to seeing. Sometimes you have to climb up something. I climbed up one of these electricity towers a little bit to get that shot. Sometimes you can just hold the camera up like that if you're just doing detail shots, like a mirror. Or climb up the high side of a road if it's cut into a hillside, and then you can shoot down on the car a bit. That's a drone shot again. With these old ones, I climbed up an old lighthouse tower. This one I climbed a couple of levels up a huge electricity pylon, and this one up a pile of gravel against this retaining wall so I could shoot that car in the distance. Locations, you can discover these more in the guide. I won't go through that in too much detail, but great locations for shooting cars. Lakeside, if you can get close enough to the water and the ramp is not like this, but more like that, then you can get a pleasing shot. That's Lake Eildon. Forests are beautiful if it's overcast. If it's sunny, forget it. It's a nightmare of contrast, hot spots, deep shadows. It's just a mess. But if it's overcast, then you can get very dark and moody images in an overcast forest like that. And fog, like I said, is your friend. If you've got fog in a busy woodland environment, it makes everything easier. It makes everything cleaner and easier to work with. Deserts are my favourite, but the least convenient because they're bloody far away. That's the first shot I ever shot of a car in a desert. That was my very first Mercedes decades ago, outside the Nullarbor Roadhouse over there. I love shooting in deserts because you get this perfectly straight horizon line which reflects in the side of the car, which is just gorgeous, but you've got to go far away to get it. This is just east of Broken Hill, more of a contextual shot, and the Hay Plains. Country roads, of course, there's lots of spots where you can pull off on the side of the road, get a simple shot like this, or get something more contextual. If you've got a really quiet road, you just park the car in the middle of the road, get out, take a few shots. This is actually dead-end road, so there was no traffic on that. Beaches are great, again, like lakes, if you can get close to the water and you're not on a ramp that's pointing down, because if you've got it pointing down like this, it generally doesn't look very good. But if it's something gentle like this, then that can work really nicely. And the good thing is, the reason why lakes and beaches are good is because you've got a fairly clean canvas in the background. You know, it's pretty much devoid of distractions, which is nice. But if you can't do that, well then there's always a spot to pull over on the roadside, like here on the Great Ocean Road. Ports and waterways are great. I used to shoot a lot of my early stuff at the ports in Melbourne. You can see how tiny Melbourne was back then. Huge open areas, great backgrounds, all that sort of stuff. So ports and docks and waterways can be great. Car parks, if they're empty and the background's not cluttered with crap, this was great because it had a hedge. They can work really well. Or a big car park that's empty at dusk or at dawn, if you elevate it a bit, so you're shooting more down on the car, that can work really well. Jetties are great if you can get onto them. Elwood, Mornington Pier. And lastly, commercial and industrial sites can work, but often you've got to deal with traffic and people and stuff. And this was just a shot I nabbed quickly at the back of the Hyatt Hotel in Essendon after a conference. So the field guide. If you want to get a copy of this for free, that's where you go. I'll give this to Saul as well so he can pass it on if necessary. And that's the discount code. So if you put that discount code in, you get 100% off and you get it for nothing. And that's it and that's all.